what started your musical journey?
I think what started it probably was like film, growing up. Growing up with my cousins, and one of the things we used to do was watch films, mainly sort of horror and sci-fi films. And so kind of the passion, I think, stemmed from that period. And then as I got into kind of early adolescence, come across Marilyn Manson, Tool, Radiohead, Korn, things like that. I think a lot of it kind of started almost on a subconscious level where music was around. Like my parents would play a lot of music and they would party a lot, so there'd always be music happening in the house, and I would have been sleeping to that music, so it would have been kind of, I guess, making its way into my subconscious. And so when I started, I guess, realising that music is a thing and that it's something you can buy, I remember my older cousin had this Manson disc, and I just remember like being completely fascinated with the cover art and just this kind of wonderment about like, what is this world? What is this about? So it was something really, I guess, quite edgy about it, and almost like this is taboo. And I think that's what made it really attractive. And then once I started listening to it, it just kind of was almost, I didn't know what to do with it. It's just like getting exposed to this, this whole other dimension that you haven't even dreamed of before. So I think that just kind of like opened Pandora's box, and then from there it was just getting exposed to different music, sharing music, and got into the world of hip hop and that kind of thing, and got addicted to buying CDs and putting your lunch money away and not eating so that you could buy CDs. And so, and I was really just started as a consumer, like just someone who just kind of appreciated music because it changed your mood, and it kind of gave you hope, I guess, in a way that life can be interesting. It kind of gives your life a bit of a soundtrack. Like I think I remember listening to music in that way, that it would be, okay, this song or this album is kind of like paving the way, for this stage of my life, this chapter of my life, was like, listening to, okay, maybe this is a Dr. Dre phase, or, this is like a DJ Quick phase, or it's kind of bizarre when I think about it, because it went from, my parents would listen to like Finn or like Tim Buckley and stuff like that, and going from that to alternative hard rock is a really interesting like juxtaposition. And yeah, they're just completely separate worlds, but I guess stepping into it completely fresh, and just, I don't know, in some ways it's a little bit like there's not a whole lot of control, like in when and what you decide to listen to. Like, it just, especially when you're buying a CD for the first time, like you're just walking through the shop and you see something that looks interesting, you have no idea what it sounds like. You go, okay, I'm gonna spend $25 and see what happens. But yeah, so I think starting off just listening to music and being completely, I guess, overwhelmed by it, having no understanding of music theory, having no understanding of production and how a song would be put together. There was the heavy metal alternative phase, and then there was the hip hop phase that went for probably 3 times as long. And that was kind of what started the creating music. Listening to all this hip hop and being completely fascinated by it, and then moving from US hip hop to Aussie hip hop was kind of a bit of a revelation, because it's like, oh shit, like we could like do this with just listening to beats and instrumentals, and then I guess kind of just realizing that we could make up our own lyrics and do a bit of freestyling, I guess, was just kind of a way of dealing with the boredom and making the night a little bit more interesting. So yeah, it started with kind of freestyling, and then I think there was kind of a bit of a frustration because it was listening to other people's beats, and you'd find a good beat that you like to rap to, but they were kind of few and far between because, you know, you sort of started to, I guess, well, I remember starting to kind of get a stronger idea of what kind of sound I liked, and sort of hitting a wall and sort of finding it more and more difficult to get a beat that kind of resonated and inspired you. And it was sort of like this, I guess, got my first PC and then started using Cool Edit Pro, and you know, had this kind of awakening that, oh, maybe you can start making our own beats, or I'm going to mess around with this and see what I can do. That kind of led to using Reason. Had Reason for quite a while, making beats, and then eventually come across Ableton. But that was sort of also at the same time as starting uni with at SAE in South Melbourne, and that was, I guess, pretty pivotal because it was like, all right, definitely want to be able to make my own beats. Have no idea how to do it. I've been messing around on computers for a while. You know, made some weird stuff, but I'd love to know how to do it properly. And so I think, you know, starting uni was pretty pivotal because that was when I started to actually get the knowledge around what gear to use and how to mix tracks, understanding how to EQ sounds, understanding how to use recording desks and all that sort of thing. Got introduced to Pro Tools, bought an M-Box, tried, I think, producing with Pro Tools for maybe a year, and then come across Ableton and completely ditched Pro Tools. Which some people, you know, find it works for them, but it seems to be more of a tracking program than a producing program. Ableton is a bit more kind of, I guess, expressive and flexible. I think like the hardest thing in the beginning was getting my head around the theory, the production theory, and understanding how to use the programs. And that frustration of, I've got this idea in my head, how do I get it out? And having absolutely no clue how to do that, and just kind of stumbling around in the dark until you might come up with something that sounds alright, but then trying to add a second or a third layer to that would usually end up in just some sort of a noise soup that just sounded wacky. So I think the frustration was just kind of in the beginning, this experimentation, but with absolutely no guidance. And then eventually starting to learn some skills, but then running into a different type of frustration, which is I still don't know how to get this idea in my head out. And you know, the more you learn about a program, you inevitably start buying more gear, which you then have to learn how to use, and that takes time and energy, and how to use gear as well. So I think for the type of music that I'm making these days, and for the sound that I appreciate the most, is probably Boards of Canada, because they really strike the balance between electronic music and also having this kind of acoustic flavour, with sort of the meshing of the digital and the analog world, and it's also got that nostalgic feel which brings me back to early days of listening to music when it was all quite new. And also a lot of people, I guess, feel this way about Boards of Canada, but they sort of give you this sense that you have you somehow listened to it before. So Boards of Canada would have to be probably one of the number one influences, and Alessandro Cortini, of course. Saw him play live like just over a year ago, and that was just mind-blowing. I think it's kind of strange because I think the process hasn't really changed. It's still this finding my way through the dark. I just probably enjoy it more, and I feel more confident that it's actually going to lead somewhere
Or
or to something worth listening to. So, you know, the process has always been sitting down, jumping on a piece of gear or playing with a plug-in, occasionally maybe a sample or jumping on the piano. Sometimes the piano is a bit of a starting point, but it's never planned, and I actually don't work well when I have a plan, so like I really do have to just sit down and let it come. And sometimes it doesn't, like it just depends on the day, depends on the mood. Probably the best outcomes are when I actually think that I'm not gonna do anything at all and I'm just sitting down, maybe learning a particular function on one of the synths, or playing around with an effect, you know, in the world of pedals that I've kind of become increasingly obsessed with. It's just sometimes sitting down and running something through a pedal and seeing what that sounds like, and then this is a cool melody, or I like the way that this sounds, and then sometimes that can be a starting point for a song. So yeah, the process is I actually feel like I kind of don't have one.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a process. It's kind of how I've always felt about music, you know, it very much feels like I'm a vessel, and the music gets channeled through me, and I'm not really responsible for what comes out the other end. It just kind of happens. And that's kind of what makes it so magical. So my goal for a little while has been to play live. It's been it's been a wrestling match, trying to like figure out how I'm going to do that. And I've gone through, you know, so many moments of tearing my hair out, trying to figure out how to do that, looking at other people, how they perform. But nothing has seemed to really click until I saw Alessandro Cortini play his set with a taped, basically like a tape deck. And I thought, shit, you can play a whole set that sounds like out of this world, and in my ears, perfect, with the simplest equipment. And like there's so much complexity to his music. I mean, I wouldn't claim that I understand his process or how he puts things together, but it was kind of a revelation for me, thinking about, well, I just want to keep it really simple as well. Like, how can I just abandon the computer, because that's just you know, it's kind of an infinite, there's too many possibilities, and that overwhelms me. So I started, my goal was okay, like I want to perform with the simplest setup possible that still allows me to have some sort of organic interaction with the music. And so the Electron Analog 4 is a synth I bought maybe like a year ago, and delved into that and realised I could actually produce a set from start to finish, use the expression pedal and guitar pedals to kind of embellish it and create a bit of movement. And for me, that's kind of been a coming together of this goal of playing live, slowly eventuating, you know. So my goal is actually to play that live, and to, you know, at least for a starting point, and see where that ends up. But you know, I think vaguely the vision is using that instrument to play live and have some sort of visual element to go along with that. Yeah, probably the Electron Analog 4 is my favourite. The sound, everything sounds good on it. Like even just like a pure sine wave, it doesn't even really need a lot of modulation. Like just even an arpeggiated sequence, put that through a couple guitar pedals, you know, distortion, delay or reverb or whatever, probably anything really. I've kind of transitioned from producing tracks in Ableton, like more sort of a composition, to now just becoming obsessed with creating textures and using guitar pedals and synths and stuff to almost create rooms of sound. And I've found that so much more inspiring than sitting down with this kind of robotic surgical editing, which part's going to fit where, and that kind of like planning and almost like obsessive process, to just like a complete organic exploration of sound. and you know, I find that has been so much more inspiring and just opening up a whole new world of inspiration in itself. It's amazing how you can just create a room of sound with 2 elements. You know, you think about like how many elements are within a room to give a room a feeling. With sound, like you really don't need much, and it can just give birth to an entire universe. So I find that's really cool, and that's been really inspiring. Bygone Botanical.
Bygone Botanical.
Yeah.
And where did that come from? Just
That was a completely random, just like, you know, this random thought that popped into my head. You know, I played around with lots of different names and would always become bored and frustrated with them. So it was almost just like I kind of just decided I'm locking it in, even though if I hate it. So Bygone Botanical is basically like 2 things. It's a commentary on evolution and history and biology. And music has been a part of evolution. It's been a part of our evolution. And we're connected to the land, we're connected to animals, and it's that kind of fusion of music and nature that I'm really interested in. So yeah, it's kind of, I guess, a commentary on that.